Minasan konbanwa yokoso. Welcome, good evening to one and all. Thank you for joining us here for this special event. I'd like to invite Beatrice Murray to begin our event tonight with a welcome to country. Beatrice is a proud Wiradjuri woman. She's a mother, a daughter, an auntie, a niece and a granddaughter to the most precious woman. She has followed her path and became a teacher. She sees our country, the Wiradjuri country, as the most beautiful country in the world.
Yina galingbu, kibir bambu, ugabu, migaibu, nadi, yinjamali, Wiradjuri mujigan, ganibu, daimbu. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my respect for Wiradjuri elders past and present. Wiradjuri main, goembanya, nindagir, Wiradjuri gu, nurumbangu. Wiradjuri people, welcome you all to Wiradjuri country. Balanda, Balam, Bambubu, Goba, Lana, Wambuwan. In the beginning, our ancient ones were at peace and knew and understood everything. Gawaiwanya, Ninya Durai, Niara Niani, Nana, Nindagir, Yindumalgiri, Boya, Nurumbangu. With this welcome, we ask you all respect the laws of this country. Boya, Ninagu, Murumbangu, Gilayala. The laws of this land says the following things. Nindagir, Idamalgiri, Main, Galambu, Nurumbangu. You must respect and honour all the people and all parts of this country. Injamara main galanbu, yandu main galandu, injamara giri nindagir. Give honour, be respectful, be polite, be gentle and be patient with all, and the people will respect you. Mara galada walang main galang. Hold fast to each other and empower the people. Ninjamara wambuwan. Buran durai bu, boya durai, yanada garai gu, bilagang galingu, yado garai gu. Look after the land and the rivers, and the land and the rivers will look after you. Nali marang mara, minyambu marang, nyani gingu, maingu, nyani winanganu, Nyani Gingu, Maradal, Madangu. We all must know and remember our past, and we all must respect our past. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. We now welcome Councillor Bill West for his opening address. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Beatrice, thank you for that welcome to country, and I too would acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I extend to you all a very warm welcome on what is becoming a chilly and cool evening. And it is wonderful to stand here and see so many people that are prepared to embrace this particular part of the reconciliation, of the celebration of the anniversary of the breakout in Cowra within hours of 75 years ago. If I may, it would be inappropriate of me not to acknowledge on my right, on sitting beside me, the Ambassador for Japan in Australia, His Excellency Mr. Takahashi, and his wife, Mrs. Takahashi, and also we have the Consul General representative of the Consulate in Sydney, Noriko Tanaka, with us. And in the crowd there are a number of people who are visiting from Japan. They are from Fukuoka, the island of Kaishu, the community of Fukuoka, and perhaps Joetsu. In the crowd I believe, is Mayor Viv Napier from South Wairarapa Council in New Zealand. And of course, this is the site of the prisoner of war camp in Cowra, where there was a mass breakout, as we know, of 1,100 prisoners of war, 5th of August 1944. But in 1943, in the South Wairarapa area, there was a breakout of Japanese and other personnel, and that resulted in the loss of life as well. So Cowra Shire Council and South Wairarapa have a twinning agreement. The importance of this event is not to celebrate war, it's to celebrate and recognise peace. And what better way to do it than to be at this beautiful, quiet part of the world where we can just sit back and imagine what it might have been like 75 years ago, and the peace and the tranquility was shattered by people who were looking to escape. Yet this site still remains, I hope, a reflection of our history, a reflection that will serve us well into the future as we keep this site preserved. So we reflect and we tell the story in a modest but appropriate way. We don't glorify it, but we understand the difference in cultures and heritage and histories, and we learn from that so that our children and our grandchildren will live in a world of peace and understanding and reconciliation. So ladies and gentlemen, this is a very special part of Cowra. Your support tonight indicates that our community also thinks the same way. So I'm sure, like you, I'm looking forward to some of the stories that are about to be told tonight, and I would assume the stories of the lanterns as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor West, for your acknowledgements and inspiring words tonight. We now welcome to the stage Lucy Alston.
Remembrance, understanding, reconciliation. These three words exist at the heart of the infamous Cowra Breakout story. This is not a fictitious story, no, this happened 75 years ago in the early hours of the morning of August 5th, 1944, right here on this very site. World War II was in full swing at the time. Some years earlier, a prisoner of war camp, POW camp, was established in Cowra to detain military personnel and civilians who were from countries known then as the Axis powers. More than 1,000 Japanese prisoners of war were held here alongside Koreans, Italians, Indonesians and Formosans. When some Japanese were to be moved to Hay without their officers, a plan was proposed, votes were cast, and it was decided by the majority of the Japanese POWs to stage a breakout. It's hard for us to understand today, but according to Japanese culture at the time, the POWs felt it was a great dishonour to their families, friends, and nation to have been captured in battle. Soldiers had been raised and trained to believe that any form of surrender to the enemy would bring great shame and consequences upon the individual and their family. Do not take the shame of capture in life, was the Japanese soldiers' Bushido code of death. The camp in Cowra was divided into 4 compounds. The Japanese prisoners had been housed in Compound B, with the Japanese officers, along with some Korean and Formosan prisoners, housed in Compound D. Italians were housed in Compounds A and C. Long stretches of patrolled ground encircled the camp, and Broadway and no man's land intersected the centre of the camp. Private Alfred Rolls drew duty that night, and he remembers it as being bloody cold. He was stationed in the middle of Broadway, relentlessly pursued by an icy wind that blew from across the surrounding paddocks and whistled around his ears. To keep the circulation going in his 40-year-old feet, he would walk incessantly up and down his patrol area, stamping on the hard-packed dirt to keep warm. Cold as he was, he made sure not to move too far from his post. Around 1:30 a.m, the wind died down and it wasn't as cold. At about 1:45 a.m, he saw what looked like a figure bobbing around in the dark between the buildings in B compound. The figure became clearer and was now running towards the barbed wire, trying to get Rolls' attention. This unidentified Japanese had cracked under the strain and was trying to warn the guards. On the night of the breakout, an unauthorised bugle was heard around 2 a.m. The Japanese POWs, armed with crude implements as weapons, charged towards the perimeter wire at 4 locations. Blankets were thrown over the wire fences, huts were set alight, and the fighting began. Flares were fired into the still night sky and gunfire punctuated the air. Australian privates Ben Hardy and Ralph Jones were killed manning the mobile Vickers machine gun. They tried bravely to defend the camp and paid the ultimate price. Private Charles Shepherd was killed on the night after leaving the B Company guard room, and 3 Aussie guards were also injured that night. Some 334 Japanese escaped into the local countryside, and sadly, Lieutenant Harry Doncaster was killed later that afternoon during the roundup. One more Australian Volunteer Defence Corps soldier, Thomas Hancock, would die after being accidentally shot whilst on patrol. The Japanese leaders of the breakout had ordered that no civilians be harmed, and they remained true to their word. Tragically, 231 Japanese prisoners died during the breakout, and 3 more would die later from their wounds. It was the largest POW breakout in world history, and the only land battle fought with a foreign enemy on Australian soil during World War II. The bodies of the Japanese POWs were laid in graves adjacent to where Australians who were also killed were laid. After the war, local Returned Service League members, men who had been in World War II, cared for the Japanese graves. In 1964, the Japanese and Australian governments agreed to establish the Japanese War Cemetery here in Cowra, together with the remains of all other Japanese who died in Australia during World War II. We are honoured to have the designer of this cemetery, Mr. Ura, in Cowra tonight. Once it was believed that a Japanese prisoner could not hope to return to Japanese society. However, significant numbers of ex-prisoners came to develop a feeling of comradeship from their Cowra experiences and formed ex-POW associations. Over the years, Cowra and Japan have extended a great deal of grace, understanding and friendship to one another. Many POWs have made the pilgrimage back to Cowra, now known as a town of international understanding. The Australian chapter of the World Peace Bell, the exquisite Japanese Gardens and Cultural Centre, and Australia's own Japanese War Cemetery all find their home right here in our town. Cowra and Japan also have a special connection through the Seikei Student Exchange Program. Cowra is a place where the stories of the past have helped to forge the way of peace. Today, tonight, we remember the Australians and Japanese who, as a result of the breakout, tragically lost their lives in Cowra.
This is a first-hand account of Alfred Flynn. I'm Lawrence Ryan, and as former president of the Cowra Breakout Association, I am honoured to read these words to you tonight. I'm Alfred Flynn, and I was born on the 3rd of February 1921. I was the butcher here at the camp. We had heard rumours that there may be a breakout, but I didn't take much notice of them because I thought it wouldn't be possible to get out. On the day previous to the breakout, I was standing at the butcher shop door when a squad of Japanese prisoners marched past under armed guard supervision, one guard at the rear and one on either side. When they passed me, they were talking and laughing amongst themselves and seemed in a very jovial mood. It was a very bright moonlight night and terribly cold, so I went to bed after removing my boots, fully clothed to keep warm, lest my overcoat, which I put on the bed. We had 3 blankets and a ground sheet. As I lay dozing, I heard 2 rifle shots, which was a breakout warning. I jumped out of bed. My friend the cook was dancing around on one leg trying to pull his trousers on like a yo-yo. We headed towards the C Company kitchen. We arrived together. The copper was still warm, so a sergeant told me to take coffee to C Company guard room. I filled 2 buckets of lukewarm coffee to take to the guard room. The guards, not on active duty, were well organised and assembled, ready for orders. I was told to go to the QM store and arm myself with a .303 rifle and ammo, because the cook and the butcher handed their rifles in. I was told to take a position at the bottom gates. By this time, one of the Lewis machine guns was pattering away, mixed with rifle fire. Bullets humming through the air, flames from burning huts, lighting up the sky, yelling, screaming, smoke from the firing of guns and burning huts around the compound. The lights failed and they switched on the auxiliary lights temporarily. After the breakout was over, there was no rest for the remainder of the morning. At daybreak, I went and saw the bodies in the barbed wire entanglements and various other places.
My name is Margaret Stent, and I am Lillian Nichols' niece. These are my Aunt Lillian's words. I was living in Cowra at the time of the breakout. Well, living where we lived, we used to see the military people go past in their trucks and go to their various places of farm work. The Italians were very happy, jovial people, and they always sang out and said hello. I didn't know any of them, but I got quite fond of the Italians. We weren't supposed to answer back, but they did, and they were always singing and happy. We used to sit in our backyard of a night and listen to the beautiful voices of the Italians. They used to sing at night, and this would come down and echo in our yard, and it was beautiful. And there were always plenty of Australian soldiers. And they used to go on marches, of course, around the main street. We'd all rush to the doors to watch them go past. It was an interesting time, an exciting time, but I don't think it was a worrying time. Nobody seemed to be terribly worried about anything. Of course, we didn't know there was going to be a breakout, but we sensed that there was tension in the POW camp. On the morning after the breakout, I returned a pram that belonged to my niece, Margaret. The night before, she'd visited our home with her mother, but they'd been run back home in the sulky. So the next morning, I returned the pram. We didn't know there had been a breakout, had no idea, and I just went on my merry way until Mum rang me and said the military had just picked up 2 Japanese right where I had just walked. They'd been hiding near the big rocks just off Macassar Street. There were 2 rocks overhanging, and quite easy for anybody to hide under. After the breakout, a police officer got me to type out a list of the names of the Japanese who had died in the breakout. He had to spell out the names because I wouldn't have had any idea how to spell them.
My name is Craig Lawler, and as an avid local historian, I'm honoured to be reading Mr. Teruo Murakami's words to you this evening. We are honoured to have Mr. Murakami with us in Cowra tonight. This is the story of Teruo Murakami, who was a prisoner in B compound on the night of the breakout, after being earlier captured in New Guinea. I had no idea where Cowra was, and the camp was crowded when I arrived. At the camp, we lived a rather heavenly life, for the most part playing mahjong with my hutmates using pieces we'd made for ourselves. Others played games with cards they'd made, and sometimes we'd play baseball with bats we'd carved. I had only been in Cowra for 3 months before that night. I was not frightened because I wanted to die. In those days, in the military in Imperial Japan, they didn't believe in the existence of POWs, so POWs didn't have a right to live. When I was taken to Cowra, I never imagined I would ever see Japan again, and actually, when I finally got home, my family said a ghost had returned from the war. The prisoners didn't know how the war was actually going, but we had no doubt about the rule that Imperial Japanese troops must not allow themselves to become prisoners of the enemy. So there was no alternative for us except to die. I wasn't one of the instigators of the breakout, but went along with the plan. There were many groups, small groups, and each group had a leader. The leader gave us a piece of toilet paper to ask everybody if they were affirmative to the breakout. I drew a circle, which meant yes. We agreed to finish our lives in death, yet, because of a basic human instinct, many of the men, including me, didn't want to die. I ran down a track to a dead end, where I jumped into a ditch as bullets flew around. Soon, Australian soldiers came and took me back to my fire-damaged hut, where I expected to be executed for trying to escape. Instead, I was set to work cleaning up the mess. I am no longer ashamed of my past as a prisoner of war, and have made pilgrimage since to pay my respects to the cemetery here in Cowra. I have placed wreaths to remember the Australian Guards and servicemen who died during the breakout, and a wreath and incense for the fallen Japanese. I have to do the prayers for those who lost their lives, my former comrades. I think sorry and thank you are two things I want to convey to the people of Australia. I think that's exactly the thing that many other POWs also want to say to the Australian people.
My name is Jonathan McLean, and I'm standing here tonight to read to you the words of my grandfather, Tom Cusack. Here with me on stage are 6 of Tom's 9 grandchildren, and his daughter, my mother, Genevieve. Here are Tom's words. I was on a switchboard operator at camp that night at about midnight. 2 shots rang out, which I'd heard often before but didn't take any notice of. And one of the sergeant majors came down in his pyjamas. He said, "Did you hear the gunfire?" I said, "Oh, 2 shots, Jack, but don't take any notice of that. We often hear them." I looked out the window and thought, hello, they've set fire to the hut. But the next morning there were 20. But I forgot to tell you that the power failed too. Mind you, I didn't know if it was from the fire from the bullets or when they'd lit the huts or whether they'd have done it. I worked the switchboard with a hand generator in the dark. I had no light and one lantern wasn't good enough. When I went to get the other lantern, it had no kerosene, and had a little corporal on the orderly room. I'd trained him to work the switchboard, and I said, "Would you go and get some kerosene, Eric?" Eric Harris was his name, and he said, "I wouldn't be game." And I said, "Well, you mind the bloody thing while I go." So I raced up about 100 yards. I went back to the switchboard, and it was overboard to buggery. Overboard means you run out of plugs. You shouldn't do it in the dark, but what was I to do? I just kept plugging away. It never frightened me a bit. I've had 3 nervous breakdowns since, and that's what the psychiatrist reckons. The breakout caused it. Oh yes, there were some troops coming over the military camp, only about 2 miles apart, as you cross country, and our mob was going to fire on them. I rang them and said, "Don't fire on them, they're our fellas."
My name is Viv Mickeljohn. As a friend of Bruce and Margaret Weir, it's with a great deal of respect and honour that I read to you tonight the words of Bruce Weir. The morning of the breakout, my father and I had left the house early to move some sheep. My mother was at the house with my 14-year-old sister Margaret. 3 Japanese soldiers approached them and indicated that they were seeking food. So my mother gave them freshly baked scones, bread with butter and jam, and provided them with a jug of freshly brewed tea. They left the house and were later picked up by the military. 2 of them were wearing old felt hats of my father's. By week's end, my father was told all the prisoners had been accounted for, and so it was safe for me to stay home alone. Everyone went to town to do the weekly shopping. I left home at about 1 p.m. on foot, walked to the back paddock, and I decided to dig a rabbit out of a burrow. I looked down, and there were the soles of 2 boots. I was transfixed with fear. There was the body of a Japanese soldier, and I presumed he was dead. I told my father when I got home, and he advised the military, and they said they'd send a work party to collect the body after the evening meal. That night, I showed them where the body was, but it wasn't there. The next morning, a search party went out and they found 2 Japanese soldiers very much alive. They'd apparently been there for 8 days in sub-zero nighttime temperatures without food. Upon hearing this story, my mother insisted she give them something to eat, much against the better judgment of some of the soldiers there, but she prevailed. It was a very tentative period. People had very strong feelings about the Japanese and what they'd caused in the Pacific. I was terrified of them, I have to say, but I'd like to think that the misunderstanding that was evident in 1944 between the 2 peoples, the Japanese and the Australians, had somewhat been alleviated by the events that have happened in Cowra in the intervening years since. I'd like to think also that what my mother did, metaphorically speaking, was the forging of the first link in a very long chain of events that enabled the building of that bridge across the gap of misunderstanding.
We now invite Misako Piper to come forward. Misako is an accomplished opera singer who tonight will perform a song called Kojo no Ski, which is a melancholic and beautiful song about a midnight moon shining over a ruined castle. This was written in the Meiji era when, by order of the government, many castles in Japan were being dismantled. It is believed to have been inspired by the Orca Castle. Please welcome Misako to the stage. Thank you, Misako. Please welcome to the stage the winner of the 2019 poetry competition, Max Harris, who will now read his winning poem.
You will have seen a photograph of two men standing face to face and shaking hands, perhaps at the information centre. Old foes break out, discard old ways, leave behind regrets and doubts, the screams and shouts of all those yesterdays. Old foes offer up a simple word of sorrow, so they may proceed into tomorrow. Old ones, as they approach their end, know that yesterday is not their friend. They hope that days of blankets over wire, nights of guns and knives and fiery blasts, strange cries within the camp, they hope that they are past. They hope that days of running from their deeds will not persist as they all face that common grave, the passing of this life. What will they save? What will they keep? What was it for? What needs? Recurring thoughts of what they ought have done and torturous regrets invade. Old foes wish some memories would fade, and old foes face the ugly truth that all of this could come to naught. But for a simple mending grace, they find at last some harmony and peace as they all face that common grave. They can say that they forgave.
Thank you, Max. Tonight, the Lantern Parade was led by a large crane, a Japanese symbol of hope and peace, constructed of bamboo harvested from the Cowra Japanese War Cemetery. It was followed by these crane lanterns with chrysanthemum, another symbol of rejuvenation. The lanterns were made by the Cowra and District School students. These represent 239 both Japanese and Australians who lost their lives due to the breakout. If you receive one of these 239 rocks when you entered the site tonight, we invite you at the end of this evening's event to come forward in silence as a mark of respect to place your rock at the base of our panels in a pile across the bottom. This is to mark tonight's event as a community. As you do so, we invite you, we invite the Cowra Vocal Ensemble to come forth and sing to us. Please welcome the Cowra Vocal Ensemble, who will sing the song Hana. Thank you, Cowra Vocal Ensemble. As we leave tonight and place the 239 rocks at the base of the panels to our right, we thank you for coming, and we encourage you to remember not only the lives lost here during the time of war, but the path forged ahead of peace and friendship. May we remember the past so we can hold firm to the path of peace for our future generations. We will light the bonfire now, and this will continue burning for our 1:50 a.m. event, right here at the very time the warning shots were fired. If you pre-purchased a ticket and are attending the dinner at the Cowra Services Club tonight, we invite you to leave first on the bus, which will take you back to the Japanese Gardens car park. You're also invited to attend our wreath laying ceremonies at 9 a.m. here tomorrow morning, followed by the wreath laying ceremony at the Japanese War Cemetery at 10 a.m. Thank you once again for joining us tonight, and good night.
What time's the dinner? 7:30. We've got an hour. We've got an hour.
Tune in tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Bye for now.